Hello everyone. Today we'll be focusing on SAT sample lessons. My name is Maci Levy and I'll be teaching the SAT prep course. So today's focus is going to be two things. We're going to focus on sentence completion and then we're also going to focus on dual short reading. There's two things I want to make sure that the class knows. One, let's take our time and work on each question together. I want everyone to know that there's no such thing as a silly question. Two, I want to make sure that we're going through this at a very steady pace and make sure that if you have any questions, please write them down and wait until the Q&A session at the end of the class. So the first section that we're going to focus on is sentence completion. For each question in this section, you'll be given an excerpt or a sentence that will be given with one or two blanks, each blank indicating that a word is omitted. Beneath the sentence are 5 words, or a set of words labeled A through E. So those are your multiple choice options. Choose the word or set of words that when inserted in the sentence best fits the meaning of the sentence as a whole. So we essentially want to fill in the blank to make a full sentence. First thing, I don't want anyone to panic. I know that it can be stressful if you don't necessarily understand the meaning of a word or see a word that's unfamiliar, but we will go through key indicators to help you understand what words are being used either in the passage or through your multiple choice options. We're going to focus on 4 key elements. 1 is active reading. 2, context clues. 3, suffixes and prefixes. And 4 is word charge. These 4 elements will be utilized to help you make the best possible decision for the proper word to be used in the blank. Okay, so the first question we are going to focus on is as follows. The blank of Maria Irene Forn's play Mud, a realistic room perched on a dirt pile, challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery. First, I want to clarify that the red line that you see up here is in fact how the blank will be signified in your SAT test. So, in order for us to decipher which of the multiple choice options is the best possible fit, we first want to utilize all of the elements and go through the question. So first thing, active reading. Active reading involves asking questions and taking notes about the excerpt or sentence. So you essentially want to read through the passage or the sentence and highlight and underline any key words, elements, or themes that will help you better understand what the author is trying to say. We want to focus on 2 things. What's the purpose of this paragraph and why include this example? Once again, these are the key focuses of active reading. The main idea or function of paragraph, author's opinion or connotation that they're trying to get across to the audience, and locations or settings that are key to the story or theme of the passage. Again, we want to underline key details and circle keywords. The second element that we want to focus on is context clues. Context clues are hints in a sentence or a passage that can help you define a word you do not know or understand. So this is important for any vocabulary that you may see in the passage that might not necessarily be familiar. What to look for? You want to look for synonyms, so similar in meaning or theme. You also want to consider antonyms. They are an opposite word in meaning or theme that will help you better understand the unfamiliar word. Then you want to focus on explanation, previous or latter lines that explain the word you didn't know. And examples illustrate how to define the unfamiliar word. So, in the passage, you will have specific, detailed examples that will help you better distinguish the meaning of the word or the passage as a whole. Then, the third element is suffix and prefixes. A suffix is an affix which follows at the end of the word. So, for example, the word loveless has the suffix less. Less meaning having less or without, and then in relation to love, therefore, loveless means having less or without love. Then we also have prefixes. A prefix is an affix which is placed at the beginning of the word. Always remember pre, which means before. So it's always at the beginning of the word or before the main word. So react. So re means again, and when you attach it at the beginning of the word, so it means acting again. The fourth element is word charge. So word charge is important because you want to identify unknown words or connotation to help eliminate through options A through E. So that's to say, what is the connotation the author is stressing on within the passage? Is it a positive connotation, a negative connotation, or neutral? Okay, so now we're going to apply those four key elements into the first passage. So, question 1, we want to focus on active reading. So, the blank of Maria Irene Forn's play Mud, a realistic room perched on a dirt pile, challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery. Our options are as follows. A, appeal, B, plot, C, mood, D, setting, and E, rehearsal. First thing we want to do is highlight key words or circle them in order for us to emphasize what words are the most important in distinguishing the theme. So, we focused on room, a dirt pile, conventional, and stage scenery, because these are key words that really help the reader understand what the main theme the author is trying to get across. Based on those keywords, we want to then look at our multiple choice options. So, does appeal in any way relate to any of these keywords by using any of our context cues? So, for appeal, we want to think, are there any synonyms within the passage that relate to appeal? All of which don't really apply to appeal, so that kind of helps us narrow it down through process of elimination. Then we want to look at plot. So, in this passage, after looking at the key words, you notice that again, plot doesn't really relate to any of these words through a synonym. You want to essentially then apply all of those options from A through E. Then, in relation to context cues, we also want to focus on antonyms. You want to relate any of these words to the key words that we focused on in the passage and see if there are opposites. Once again, we don't really see anything that are opposites, but what we do notice is that for synonyms, setting relates to stage scenery. Then you want to focus on explanations. So, an explanation within the keywords that we outlined was a dirt pile, and the dirt pile explains how the room was perched and where it was set. Then, the last thing we want to focus on is examples. So, within our keywords, an example of stage scenery is the room perched on a dirt pile. So we have an example. Once you look at all of these words and relate them together, you notice that stage scenery describes the room, and the room is a setting. And if you apply setting into the blank, you would have as follows. The setting of Maria Irene Form's play Mud, a realistic room perched on a dirt pile, challenges conventional interpretations of stage scenery. Therefore, the correct answer is setting. Question 2. Ironically, an affluent society that purchases much more food than it actually needs suffers because of that blank, since in conditions of affluence diseases related to overeating and poor nutrition seems to blank, period. Our options are as follows. A, lavishness and adapt. B, overabundance and thrive. C, corpulence and vex. D, practically and awaken. And E, commonness and abound. Once again, the first step we want to focus on is active reading. So underline any key words or examples that you feel as though will help you better understand the theme. So, in this exercise, we focused on affluent society, much more food, needs, conditions of affluence, overeating, and poor nutrition. Okay? So based on this, I would like you to try and use the 4 elements of context clues to better decipher what is a potential answer from options A through E. So now I'm going to call on a student to see what option they felt as though was the best possible fit. Yes, Lauren?
But I don't understand. Can you tell me what affluent society means?
Sure. So sometimes when you look at a passage and you don't necessarily understand a word, you want to use the 4 different elements of context clues to maybe narrow it down and give you a better understanding. So we might not know what affluent means, but is there an explanation within the passage that potentially can help us better understand what an affluent society is?
Yes. For example, it says that purchases much more food than it actually needs.
Exactly. So even if you don't 100% understand what affluent means, you do understand that this specific society does have the means or is rich enough to purchase more food than it actually needs. So we do understand that this society is 1, better off, and 2, has the resources to essentially overspend on or waste. Okay, so now we're going to focus on our options. Is there anyone here who can tell me what a great explanation or example would be within context cues? So does anyone have any idea of what a possible option could be to eliminate one of the multiple choice options? Yes?
When looking at option D, if you see the word practically and then relate it back to the sentence, I can't find any synonyms that correspond to the word practically. If anything, it's an antonym.
Perfect. So again, practically doesn't have any relation or meaning that corresponds to any of the words or connotations within this passage. Practically, if anything, contradicts what an affluent society is, because an affluent society overuses, overspends, which is not being practical. Therefore, we can eliminate option D. Then, if you want to look at commonness, it relates to the idea of an action being common, happening often. If I look at my passage, relate it back to synonyms, antonyms, explanations, and examples, I notice that nothing indicates this action being a common action within society. So it's easy to assume that this is subject to eliminate. Then we want to focus on word charge. So again, word charge focuses on the connotation, the theme the author is trying to get across to our audience. So if I look at lavishness, lavishness usually has a positive connotation for it. It's the finer things in life. Then we want to look at adapt, and adapt could be seen as a positive connotation because it means the person has acclimated. Then we want to look at overabundance. Overabundance has a negative connotation to it because it's more than what you would necessarily need. And then you have thrive. Thrive could be utilized in both positive and negative connotations, so therefore we left it as neutral. Then you want to look at corpulence. Corpulence is a little bit trickier of a word. It does mean fat in relation to a person. And then you also have vex, which means making a person feel annoyed, both of which have negative connotations. However, if we were to apply corpulence within the sentence, it wouldn't necessarily give the proper connotation we're looking for. That's not necessarily the connotation that the author is going after. So we can eliminate option C. Then we want to focus on option A. Again, option A, both of the words have positive connotations. But after then providing word charge for the actual passage, we notice that the entire passage's connotation is actually quite negative. Therefore, we can eliminate option A, which then leaves us with the correct answer, which is option B. So, ironically, an affluent society that purchases much more food than it actually needs suffers because of that overabundance, since in conditions of affluence, diseases related to overeating and poor nutrition seem to thrive. Now we're going to move on to the dual short reading exercises. There will be a passage that one must read, followed by a series of questions related to the passage content. Questions following a pair of passages may question the relationship between the two passages. So that is to say, you may be presented with one or more passages, but it is also important to note the different relationships corresponding between these different passages. So how do they relate to each other? How do they contradict each other? Perhaps there's contrast and comparison. So focus on those key elements when you're active reading. Answer the questions on the basis of what is stated or implied in the passage and in any introductory material that may be provided. So passage 1. The intelligence of dolphins is well documented by science. Studies show that dolphins are able to understand sign language, solve puzzles, and use objects in their environment as tools. Scientists also believe that dolphins possess a sophisticated language. Numerous instances have been recorded in which dolphins transmitted information from one individual to another. A recent experiment proved that dolphins can even recognize themselves in a mirror, something achieved by very few animals. This behavior demonstrates that dolphins are aware of their own individuality, indicating a level of intelligence that may be very near our own. Question 1. In lines 2 to 8, the author of passage 1 mentions activities that suggest dolphins A. are unusually sensitive to their environment, B. do not generally thrive in captivity, and C. have a unique type of intelligence, D. are uncommonly playful animals, and E. have skills usually associated with humans. The first thing we want to do is active reading. So again, we've already highlighted key words and indicators that will help us better understand the connotation, the meaning, and the theme that the author is trying to get across to the audience. The first question wants us to focus on lines 2 to 8. So we did underline those lines, and we will focus on these specific lines within the next slide. So as you can see, these are lines 2 to 8. So now we're going to read lines 2 to 8 together, but I'm actually going to call upon a student to read it out loud to us. Is anyone interested? Go ahead.
Studies show that dolphins are able to understand sign language, solve puzzles, and use objects in their environment as tools. Scientists also believe that dolphins possess a sophisticated language. Numerous instances have been recorded in which dolphins transmitted information from one individual to another. A recent experiment proved that dolphins can even recognize themselves in a mirror.
Perfect. Can I get another student to read out the question for us again?
In lines 2 to 8, the author of passage 1 mentions activities that suggest dolphins.
Okay, so now we're going to go through options A through E, but as you can see, we've actively read these options and highlighted any keywords. When it comes to passage reading, or deciphering the connotation or theme within a passage, and your options require sentences, it might also be crucial for you to focus on key words within each sentence. So we focused for option A on sensitive and environment, option B, thrive in captivity, option C, unique and intelligence, option D, uncommonly playful, and E, have skills usually associated with humans. So now we're actually going to use a little bit of explanation and example from context cues and also word charge. So the author seems to be displaying a positive connotation when discussing the intelligence of dolphins. It's discussing how they're able to solve problems, puzzles, discuss with one another, which is definitely something that differentiates them from other animals. So when we're looking at our options, we want to see if any of our keywords relate to the connotation of the passage or are in contrast to the connotation of the passage. First thing we want to focus on is sensitive to the environment. It's possible that we would use sensitive to the environment as the best fit multiple choice answer. Thrive in captivity. If you look at the passage, lines 2 to 8, it doesn't mention anywhere the word captivity or having dolphins in captivity or having them thrive in captivity. Nothing that really touches on it, relates to it, explains it, so we can eliminate option B. Then we want to focus on C, have unique type of intelligence. It's a possibility. D, are uncommonly playful animals. So uncommonly, not usually playful. From what it seems like from lines 2 to 8, we do notice that that's actually in contrast to the connotation of the passage. If anything, we can decipher that dolphins are actually quite playful, whether it be with humans or with fellow dolphins. So it's safe to assume that we can eliminate option D. And then option E is skills associated with humans. Now, when I look at the passage, I notice that they understand sign language, solve puzzles, and use objects in their environment as tools. All of those skills are skills that humans are able to conduct. Therefore, option E is a viable option. Then we want to look back at option A, sensitive to their environment. It doesn't really, in lines 2 to 8, mention anything about how they interact or how they respond within their environment. So we're not sure if it's sensitive, playful, so it's safe to assume we can eliminate option A. Now that we have options C and E, you want to use the process of elimination through the 4 different elements of context cues, word charge, and active reading to decipher what is the best possible answer. So again, I want to go through it. Have a unique type of intelligence. Do we notice any synonyms or similar themes or meanings within the keywords that we highlighted? If you notice, unique means special, one of a kind. If dolphins are able to take part in the same skills as humans, that doesn't necessarily differentiate them, make them special, or one of a kind. So we can eliminate option C. Therefore, the correct answer is E, have skills usually associated with humans. Now I want to move on to the Q&A portion. Go ahead.
Can you please clarify for me what word charge is? I don't quite understand.
Sure. Are there any specifics within the concept of word charge that you don't understand?
Well, I don't really understand how something could be neutral in comparison to a positive or a negative.
That's a great question. So, if you have a neutral word charge, it essentially means that that word is impartial to the meaning of the passage. It usually is a word that can be used both in positive and negative connotations. So, a word that could possibly be used as a neutral word is the word relaxed. You can be relaxed, and it could be seen as a positive connotation. So, the students were very relaxed when the teacher explained the questions thoroughly. Or, you can use relaxed in a negative connotation. For example, the students were extremely relaxed when the teacher was trying to explain pressing information, which therefore caused them to not understand the material thoroughly. There was a negative connotation on relaxed because their over-relaxed demeanor caused them to not necessarily understand the information thoroughly. So that's an example of neutral. I really want to commend you guys on a great job and thank you for a great lecture.